Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Our show today is The Human Blind Spot, Why Trust is Your Biggest Cybersecurity Vulnerability. I'm joined by Robert Siciliano, bestselling author and cybersecurity expert. Welcome, Robert.
Good day. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Well, I'm excited about this. We haven't spent a lot of time on the show talking about security, and obviously it's a big issue when we talk about AI, and a lot of companies are very concerned about it. So I think this will be a fun conversation. Why don't we start by just doing a quick introduction?
Sure. I am what might be considered a 30-year security veteran. I've been doing this since I was actually in my teens, so that would be 40 years. I got hacked. Yeah, I got hacked in 1995. That meant I had an IBM PS1 consultant, which was the make and model of a Windows 3.0 OS with 150 megabyte hard drive. And I had a dial-up connection to AOL and the ability to accept Visa, MasterCard, American Express, credit card, merchant. And I lost thousands of dollars through a compromise. And back then, I didn't know what, hacking was or internet fraud, or it just wasn't a thing. And I was already in the business of security, personal protection. And when that happened, I was, devastated, floored, but also like amazed at the ease of what they did and how they did it. And from that point on, my focus from personal protection in the physical world evolved, didn't change, it evolved to personal protection in the virtual world as well. I am a best-selling author and the architect of what I call the strategic human firewall. My work has been on, morning shows like Good Morning America, Today's Show, CNN. But most importantly, I'm a girl dad. I have been married for 25 years. I am what's called a flotilla staff officer with the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary. Nice. And I've run 13 Boston marathons. I ride a purple 1987 Harley Davidson, which is one of my favorite things to do. And I have, I'm a dog dad to a 8-year-old Belgian Malinois.
Very nice, very nice. My border collies sitting out here. They could have some fun together, I think. And by the way, I'm a girl dad too, so I definitely can identify with that. So that's great. It's interesting when we talked before. You've spent a lot of time at the intersection of human behavior and cybersecurity, and it gave you some really interesting perspectives, which is one of the reasons that I thought this would be a fun conversation. But can you help business leaders, think about security differently? Like, we always sort of think about this as a technology problem, but what is it they miss about the human side of cybersecurity?
Yeah. So leaders are missing what I call the wetware vulnerability, right? So wetware is another name for software, but in this case, wetware is essentially the human brain. I use wetware and human vulnerability interchangeably. And technology, of course, blocks malicious code, but it cannot patch the human biological default to trust. We have what I call a cognitive gap where social engineering bypasses logic through often what is considered manufactured urgency. Okay. We recognize that when emotions spike, technical awareness vanishes, which we see consistently. Okay. Leaders must close this gap by training the brain, the human, to recognize the psychological hooks. And these are psychological hooks. It's not just scammer grammar. It's not highlighting a link and looking at the root of it. It is the psychological hooks, transforming employees from liabilities into what I consider a proactive human sensor network.
Interesting. Well, you mentioned to me before the word the human blind spot, and that's your in your description, it's this sort of biological need to trust one another. But can you talk a bit about that and what that looks like in practice, and why it makes employees vulnerable to social engineering and cybersecurity risks?
It's pretty simple, actually, and I don't know if it's a concept that we focus on enough. Okay,
Mhm,
the idea behind the human blind spot is that it is the psychological instinct to trust what is familiar to us. It is
mhm,
that cognitive gap where biological trust overrides digital suspicion, fraud, and so forth, leaving the door wide open for all kinds of schemes and scams, and essentially, AI
mhm,
enhanced digital deception is paramount right now. The biological default to trust in psychological shortcuts are heuristics that criminals use to bypass human logic, and they're really good at that. They've figured that all out. We
mhm,
haven't as humans, but they have. Biological impulse versus intellectual understanding is the internal conflict between our evolved survival instincts and our modern knowledge of digital and just risks in general. Keeping in
mhm,
mind that, humans trust by default. We've been trusting since we came out of our mama, and that is our default.
mhm,
As an interdependent species, we require that we trust one another. Interdependent means we are dependent upon each other for our survival. Of course, the root of that is our procreation. And to do that, to engage in that, we need to trust each other. And so all day, every day, the people we encounter, the emails we receive, the phone calls we get, the text messages, and so forth, we want to and we need to trust that the person on the other end or that's standing in front of me has my best interest in mind. Therefore, we give the benefit of the doubt pretty much throughout our entire lives with
mhm,
probably all of our interactions. Um, we rely upon that and we don't necessarily deviate from that until something doesn't feel right or seem right. And the bad guy's job is to override that, making everything feel right and seem right
mhm.
so that they can essentially accomplish their mission.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it plays into how our natural view of the world, I guess. I mean, and I almost like when I think of it, I think, oh yeah, there's a lot of issues around trust, but the truth is, trust often is rooted at that mistrust is rooted more in the technology than it is in the human to human interaction. So that part is innate, and I react to other humans in almost a default. So that's really interesting. I haven't really thought of it that way.
Most people don't, and not
Mm,
trusting others is actually not normal, and it's not
yeah,
easy. It's not easy to not trust others. It's easier to trust them. We default to
mhm,
easy, right? We avoid difficult. And
yeah,
so, if that's our default, by nature, not trusting others means like at some point in our lives, we were hurt, harmed, betrayed. And along with not trusting others, that hurt, harm, betrayed has negative feelings that human beings would
mm,
prefer to sweep under the rug and to not address.
yeah. Yeah, that I mean, that is I definitely can see that in myself and others that it's much easier to avoid conflict than it is to step into it. So that naturally leads me to default in a trust way. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, we were talking about, and I know in your live sessions you do this question. You ask, if you have a home security system, and that gives you some really interesting information and helps people kind of become more aware. So can you talk a little bit about how that response actually, helps people think about the risk in their daily lives?
Yeah, such a simple question, and the answers are unfortunate, and it's
Mm,
just fascinating how this one question gets people's attention. So I asked this question: how many of you in the room, whether they are just everyday consumers, frontline employees, company officers, or security professionals? I was speaking to a room of 200 security professionals recently. I asked, how many of you actually have a home security system? Which I think is fundamental, you know, kind of
mm,
like, getting a good night's sleep and consuming good foods and nourishing your body with fluids. Like security is on the hierarchy of human needs, like at the base of the triangle: security,
right.
stability, structure, protection, eating, sleeping, drinking, and so forth. Right. So, generally, when I ask that question, how many of you have this home security system? Less than 15% of the room
Mhm,
raises their hand. Okay. So
mm,
we live in a country where about 1.5 million to 2 million burglaries occur every single year. That's what, 15 to 20 million burglaries in the next
Yeah.
decade. Okay. So those responses amongst everybody, including security professionals, reveal a profound gap when only 15% of security pros protect their own homes. It exposes a dangerous culture of fatalism.
Mm.
Phrases like, when I say, why don't you have the home security system? They say, well, I have insurance. Yeah, okay. I don't know if you're really well thought out in that regard. Or they say, well, if they want to get in, they're going to get in, which may be true, but not in my house. I've made steps to make that not happen. That
Right.
said, that fatalist attitude towards security amongst your frontline employees or your company executives uh, basically defines a psychological defense mechanism used to justify the human blind spot. This
Mm.
"it can't happen to me" mindset proves that even experts treat security as an intellectual check the box exercise rather than a survival habit, which is what it
Right.
is, right?
Mm.
They are hacking their own brain, their own wetware, to avoid the perceived inconvenience of being vigilant, which being vigilant takes a little bit of extra work.
Yeah.
Adding a password to a mobile phone, changing up your passcodes. This is all a level of vigilance that most people don't want to engage in because they don't think they need to begin with, because they don't want to, because they trust by default. Like all of this plays into it. We call this
Mm.
security theater. We've known about this for quite some time, where people understand the risk, but lack the emotional appreciation to act on security. If the people build walls and won't lock their doors, the default to trust remains our greatest unpatched vulnerability.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that I get in discussions with people about, well, why don't you have a password manager, or why are you using your children's birthdays as your password, or things like that. Like those just seem fundamental. But I guess you're right. I mean, it is really that little inconvenience of having to generate a complex password and manage it in some way that's too much in some cases. Huh.
Security awareness training is not
Mm.
effectively delivered today. It's do this, don't do that, and so forth. And most who are presenting it, CISOs and so forth, aren't really engaged in the practice of security
Mm.
effectively in their own lives or truly understand the resistance that people have, which is why we are in the conundrum that we are with
Yeah.
175-ish billion records compromised in the past 15, 20 years. And then 90 plus percent of the passwords that are exposed and all the breaches say that about 94% of consumers are using the same passcode over and over again. That's
Mm.
truly a lack of awareness or appreciation, ultimately not resulting in failure. And we're going to keep seeing
Yeah.
that until we change the conversation, which is what this dialogue, what we're having here, is all about.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like an inconvenience to a lot of people, right? Oh, I have to have more than one password, and I have to remember that, and I don't have that many sticky notes to put on my screen. I mean, it's
Silly.
like,
It's silly, yeah. And
yeah.
and most of the employees have never had an opportunity to have a dialogue with an expert, including their CISO, like we're having right now, that explains all of these various risks in such a way that it affects them. And we can certainly speak to that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is easy to minimize it, and it's almost like I'm thinking about it. I don't appreciate security, right? I have some awareness because I don't have a choice. I have to have passwords. I have to change my password every now and then because they make me. But it's different, right? I don't really appreciate what that's doing for me. I mean, how do you help people understand that? I mean, how is that different? How do they shift from awareness to appreciation?
Yeah. So security appreciation is something that I don't know that anyone truly gets or understands. It's something that I've been speaking to for all of my professional life, security appreciation. It
Mm.
is the shift from security awareness. And security awareness to me is like it's from your neck up. It's in my head intellectually. I understand and recognize risk. I understand that through phishing simulation training that I have to look out for this and that, and I have to do these different things, and I have to acknowledge that risk. And if I don't do it effectively, there's going to be repercussions. Intellectually, I understand all of that. Okay. So the shift from awareness, knowing, to appreciation is caring. Caring, I say, is from the heart up, right? From the heart
Mm,
up means that not only am I aware of all these various risks, I understand them, but it means something and it matters to me because it's important to me both personally and professionally that these things make a difference in the quality of my life, not just at work, but truly at home. Security
mm,
appreciation and the security appreciation gap is that chasm between an employee's intellectual understanding of risk, which is awareness, and the emotional commitment to act on that knowledge, which
mm.
is the appreciation aspect of it.
Yeah. I mean, that's I know you use this term kitchen table effect, right? That's when as an employee, then you're going home and you're actually talking about it with your family. That's a different level of understanding and commitment than the way we've, kind of approached it in the past, or we kind of compartment this into a professional thing, and but it really should just be a behavior that we take through everything we do.
Yeah, the kitchen table effect is 1,000% overlooked. There's
Mm,
no kitchen table effect happening with phishing simulation training, with the
mm,
dialogue or the actually the monologue that's taking place in most corporate awareness training sessions. The kitchen table effect is what I call the multiplier effect, where successful security appreciation training ends with the employee teaching the concept to their family at home,
mm,
cementing those lessons for life. You make it about them and their risks, their worries, their fears, their concerns, their
mm,
own bank accounts, their own identities. Once you begin to make it about them, you're changing the monologue to a dialogue, and you're actually involving them in their families in the
mm,
process of risk management. And that's what gets people to sit up and pay attention. Listen, in every single presentation I've ever done, every one, I walk in the room, I get on the I'm introduced, I get on the platform. It's always live. What I do is live, whether it's in
mm,
person or, via virtual learning. And when I walk in the room, I'm looking at, let's say 100 people, and let's say, 75% men, 25% women. And this is what I see. And if you're not looking at this on video, is people with arms crossed looking at me with a scowl. Okay. And and I know what they're saying to themselves. Okay, security guy, what are you going to tell me that I don't already know? Right. I don't want to be
mm,
here. I don't need to be here. I understand how this stuff works. And then I start talking about them. And I start asking them questions, and they respond with the answers. And, the home security question. And how
mm,
many of you use a different passcode across multiple accounts? And that's usually like a different passcode across multiple accounts, even in a room full of employees, is usually less than 20%. How many of you are using two-factor authentication? That's usually about 20%, which is usually a little bit more because it's required in more
right,
places, which means like 80 to 90% of the room is, not using two-factor and using the same passcode across multiple accounts, maybe not in their professional life, but in their personal life, right? And
right,
as I'm asking these questions and talking about how 15 billion passwords have been exposed in data breaches, over the past 15, 20 years, what happens is the arms start to go down by their side, right? And they literally like lean in, like they're physically lean in to the conversation. Like you can see it happen. Like you can see their body language change. And as the arms go down and their physical bodies begin to lean in, what happens next is the hands go up because now they start asking questions. So
right,
now what's happening is you're challenging their belief systems, you're challenging their understanding of what security is and truly what it isn't. And now they're saying, oh, like in their head, they're saying, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. This is more about me. This is about my security. He's talking to me. And
Yeah.
now they're interested to hear what I have to say because it involves what they are truly concerned about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it takes it from intellectual to emotional, right? I mean, if I'm emotionally invested in this, then I look at it differently than I would if I'm intellectually hearing your conversation about security and about the technology.
The only way to change minds is to change hearts.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
have
that
to get
makes sense.
emotional buy-in with everything. People don't buy, intellectually. They justify intellectually. They buy
Yeah,
emotionally.
yeah.
It's the same thing with security. You don't buy into security intellectually. Yeah, I understand it, but how does it affect me and my worries and fears and emotions? Like that's emotions.
Hmm. I mean, if all security is personal, which that's you've said this already, and it is an interesting point, and certainly from a behavioral standpoint, I understand, but I mean that's pretty bold. I mean, how do you make a case to a CISO or board member, that sees security really as an organizational responsibility? How do you help them understand this idea that security really is personal and has to be personal to create that behavioral change?
So it starts with, understanding. At least from my perspective, I started doing what I do back when I was a teen. I met
Mhm,
my first victim of sexual assault at 13 years old, and this we're going on like 45, 6 years ago. And
mhm,
we didn't talk about sex, never mind rape back then. And
right,
when I learned about what this girl's mom's boyfriend did to her, I was
mhm,
devastated. Like I didn't know what sex was. So I go home and ask my dad, what is rape? And he explained to me the birds and the bees and forcible rape in the exact same conversation. And as a
yeah,
young teen, this is my knowledge of the world. So it had a profound effect on the way that I viewed the world around me. And so from that point on, I started teaching personal protection to all those around me because it meant something and it mattered to me. I appreciated the value that understanding how to physically defend yourself mattered and how to use a pepper spray or a stun gun or, just taking courses on how to poke somebody in the eyes and hit him in the groin. Like that meant something and mattered. And it still does today. It's
yeah,
still a very important conversation that is considered what I would think is as an uncomfortable conversation that I don't think we have with our loved ones to the degree that we should, right?
yeah,
And that said, like the core, all security is personal, is the core belief that people protect what they love.
yeah,
And by teaching someone to secure, say, their child's digital footprint, their own identity, their bank account, their data, their dollars, I mean, heck, their home, right? You create a more secure employee at work. And for the CISO, I think by making security a bit more about them in their own lives and their own concerns, making the CISO more human, talking about their own mom and how their mom just can't figure out how to manage passcodes and how their own family
yeah,
members that they have to constantly intervene when they receive text messages and emails. They're always getting, communications from people in their life regarding all these basic 101 stuff and making the CISO themselves that much more human and relaying the exact same things that they're dealing with in their own lives and making security personal to them. And
mhm,
by making it personal to their employees, I think that begins to change the conversation from, again, this monologue, which is what security training is today, to a
yeah,
dialogue of what security training could or should be.
mm. To turn this back to the show, and obviously, this is a great background to get into this conversation, but today, with AI, with all the advancements and honestly, the capabilities to do much deeper behavioral analysis of people and predict behaviors and outcomes and just do things faster in this world. I mean, how's that changed the threat landscape and things like deep fakes and voice cloning and so AI driven social engineering? I mean, all those things, can bypass a lot of the technology that we've had. I mean, how does that change and reshape the risk profile for individuals, and for your business?
So I'm going to boldly state, and maybe even crassly state, that if we keep heading in the same direction that we are in regards to security awareness training, that we are screwed. Okay.
Mm,
Now, I am no fatalist, but when it comes to this right here, where we're at right now in the current state of, infosec and security awareness training, that yeah, we are effectively screwed going forward because AI has stripped away the clumsy red flags of traditional fraud. What that
mm,
means is in the past, criminals relied on essentially blunder force, phishing, mass blasting emails riddled with scammer grammar. Today, generative AI allows for high precision impersonation. Okay, high precision impersonation, essentially at scale. Criminals are now using neural puppetry to create perfect lies by scraping just seconds of audio from social media. They're using, of course, voice cloning to impersonate a trusted source like a spouse, CEO, attorney, with I think it's really 100% accuracy at this point, right? I don't know
mm,
that we can tell the difference ourselves, technology can, but humans really can't, right? This weaponizes our biological default to trust, that human blind spot, making deception feel 100% human. Furthermore, AI automates the grooming process, right? This is
mm,
done over time using normalizing dialogue to build rapport to exploit what I call the loneliness loophole, right?
mm.
25% of us are lonely as our default every day.
Yeah.
That's normal, that's natural, that's instinctively designed as a social species so that we would gravitate towards other humans to procreate. They call it the
Mm,
pain and the ache of loneliness. And and
mm,
scammers know this and they use this against us. So essentially, AI removes the manual labor of social engineering, allowing a single predator, which is what they are, to pilot thousands of digital puppets, which are
mm,
your employees, simultaneously bypassing firewalls by hacking the humans, their wetware instead.
mm. Yeah. I mean, this idea, I do a lot of research around customer experience and AI, and we've been talking for a while about this idea of digital twins or building a system that can can understand and build models of the individual and then test different ways of interacting at machine speed, which of course is, but if I turn that around and I think of that in this security context, that's about as scary as anything I can think of.
Yeah.
So how do we step beyond that? I mean, how do we help people get past that? What do we do? Because if I was just focused on that, I'd start to think, gee, there's nothing we can do.
Well, I think that truly begins with changing or at least modifying or adapting the conversation. Okay.
Mm,
I'm certainly not saying, enough is enough with the phishing simulation. I'm saying, in addition to, you know, like right now, I think phishing simulation training is like putting the cart before the horse. So it's
mm,
kind of like, sending off a person into the woods um, with a map and saying, okay, get from point A to point Z and good luck. Whereas, whereas if you actually sat that person down with a guide, a human that's
mm,
actually been through those woods before, and that guide, that human that has actually traversed all of those trails and can look at the map and can have a conversation with that human and say to that human, okay, so as you're heading along this particular trail, start looking to your right or your left because you're going to start to see a ridge, and that ridge overlooks a body of water. So once you get to that point, now this is what you're going to be looking for next. Well, when that person who has actually sat down with that guide, who now begins that hike across that trail, now has
mm,
an understanding of what to look for. Now
Mhm.
they already have what ifed and they've foreseen. They've already kind of been there. And so now when they actually come upon a certain fork in the road, they have a better understanding of which way to go. And
Mm.
currently that's what phishing simulation training is. It's okay. It's the test. It's okay. Do here's what you need to look for, but there's no actual dialogue with another human first as to okay what this is
Mm.
all about and why it matters to you. Okay, and so I've introduced what I call the strategic human firewall.
Mm.
Okay, um, it is what I consider really the ultimate defense against deception. It explains everything that we've talked about thus far, why we resist security, right?
Mm.
Why we're biologically wired to trust, why we function in a certain level of denial that it's not going to happen to me, why we engage in certain levels of fatalism. Okay. Starting with all of that, basically like changing up the conversation, making it about them. It's all security is personal
Mm.
so that they begin to see risk as it's associated with them and I look at it as a proactive governance, a mindset that's designed to transform employees from passive targets into an active detection layer. They've
Mm.
sat down with that guide, they've gone over the map, they've looked at the fork in the road, they understand what to look out for, right? It marks a fundamental shift from I trust what I see to I verify everything. You've
Mm.
got your employees involved in the process of security at a level in which means something. It matters to them. They now appreciate. As we said, most security awareness training is a monologue. It's a
Mm.
monologue, right? A monologue is, the learner is talked at rather than talked with, right? A dialogue. That is a monologue versus what I would recommend is a dialogue. It relies on the hammer
Mm.
approach, a barrage of don'ts and or else threats that only breed resentment and apathy. True security
Mm.
appreciation requires a dialogue. Instead of blunt force, we use a scalpel, engaging the wetware, the human vulnerability through interactive inquiry, asking the right questions, providing the right straight talk, you know, answers that stick, again, because it means something and it matters. When you move beyond the hammer, right, to the scalpel, you close that security appreciation gap and build a secure security culture with
Mm.
vigilance.
Mm. So, I mean, it sounds like it is almost having this conversation is more like modeling the behavior and helping people down that path versus trying to show them a path and let them work through that on their own.
Like being a girl
Interesting.
dad, right? I
Mm.
am constantly challenged. And I would imagine being a boy dad, you're challenged too, but I don't have that
Mm.
experience. Being a
Yeah,
parent
me either.
right. Being a parent is challenging. They say that like boys are more difficult when they're younger and girls are more difficult when they become teens. Well, you know, no offense to anybody, this may not be politically correct, but once those hormones kick in, at least from my experience, you've got a different kid sitting in front of you. And I have had to evolve with parenting uh, girls. I've had to be
Mhm.
more empathetic and sympathetic. I've had to be more understanding. And that has required a tremendous amount of flexibility on my part. It's required a tremendous amount of introspection. Okay. And and I don't know that I could educate or guide my loved ones through e-learning. I don't know that I could do
Mm.
that in a monologue, talking at them. Nobody wants to be told what
Right.
to do. So it requires a deep conversation in order to effectively raise loving, caring, empathetic, proactive humans,
Mm.
children to become adults. And I don't know that like we take that into consideration at all when it comes to security awareness training. And security fundamentally revolves around the relationship between good and evil. It
Mm.
means that 97%, and y'all can research this, and I am correct on this, 97% of all the people that you will ever meet in the course of your life are essentially good by their nature. 97% are
Mhm.
worthy of your trust. That 97% of humanity, by their nature, by their heart, they mean to do no harm. They may occasionally lie, they may occasionally deceive, they may occasionally harm, but that is not necessarily their full intent.
Right.
Whereas about 3 to as much as 4, and maybe even 5 or 6%, depending on what you read, of humanity are what the medical community would consider antisocial personality disorders. They are
Mm.
the sociopaths and the psychopaths. They are the hardcore narcissists that do not experience empathy, sympathy, guilt, remorse. They truly fit the definition of having no shame. They
Mm.
are the predators amongst us. They hit, harm, take from others with no remorse whatsoever. And they
Mm.
make a tremendous amount of noise. And when we
Yeah.
think about them as the 97%, we don't want to ever think or believe that they would ever choose us, that they would ever hurt or harm us or our spouse or our children. We recognize that they do, but we don't necessarily discuss or have those conversations because we don't want to, because it involves worry and fear. It involves scenarios
Mhm.
that are beyond our understanding of why would somebody want to do that. Well, they want to do that because it's what they do. It's their nature. It's like no different than the wolf who hunts the bunny rabbit, or the coyote that goes after your dog,
Yeah.
or the lion on the Serengeti after the gazelle. It's natural and it's normal to be a predator for those in the animal species and those in the human species.
Right.
But we don't look at security as that. We look at it as worry and fear, hurt and harm. It can't happen to me, denial, versus
Yeah.
recognizing risk effectively, no differently than putting a seatbelt on because it's a smart thing to do. And once you look at it,
Mhm.
in that manner, it begins to be something, oh, you lean in, the arms go down, the hands go up. Okay, I get it. This is actually not what I thought it was going to be. This is
Mhm.
actually a good thing. I want more security in my life. How do I make this happen? I have questions.
Yeah. Well, so that kind of brings me back to we started talking a little bit about compliance training, security training, and why it hasn't been that effective, or it almost feels like a checkbox exercise in most of the companies that I've seen. Right? They're trying to provide all these different methods, video and learning management systems that help track that. But how do we make this better? I mean, what should organizations do to deliver education around cybersecurity, security that actually does help you get to this behavioral shift?
So when you think about cybersecurity, what is it, like 15, 20, 25 years old, more or less?
Yeah.
It's a relatively new, I guess, issue.
Mhm.
And things like, compliance training and phishing simulation training has been around for maybe 15 years, you know,
Yeah.
and that's all relatively new. It's what's available. It's what's been essentially approved as a form of, due diligence that's accepted in a court of law. Should there be a breach, that you can show that you are compliant, and
Mhm.
that's our standard. And there's metrics behind it, and there's, you can look at it and you can say, yep, we did our job, therefore we are, legally compliant, and that is all good and well, and of course is still necessary. However, just within the past week, I met someone who said, she worked with a mortgage broker for the past 30 years, who was one of the best that she's ever known,
Mhm.
excellent in her profession, that was just recently fired because she just couldn't pass the phishing simulation training. She just kept failing. And
Mm.
and I don't know that it's because she failed. I think the training failed her. And so what that boils down to is, um, security fatigue is caused by the compliance trap that we're all in, bombarding employees with complex, impersonal rules that trigger security aversion. And
Mm.
again, security goes against our core beliefs. The compliance trap is a false sense of security felt by meeting regulatory requirements while the actual human behavior truly remains unchanged. The wetware,
Mhm.
right? Phishing simulation training is necessary, of course, like we've mentioned multiple times, and it's designed to fix the problem of phishing. But what it fails to do is address the human where they're at in their lives. Okay, how does this affect me? It fundamentally does not make the employee care about security. And if the employee doesn't care, what's the point of the training? It doesn't change their
Right.
behavior. Okay. What sometimes happens as a result is we engage in blaming the victim, like the employee getting fired, and in some cases, even shaming the victim. We've been shaming the victim forever, you know? That leads to what I call the silent failure, which is a compromise of the vulnerable human that triggers no technical alarms and often goes unreported due to the shame barrier, which we all possess a level of shame. It's a very natural human thing. The shame is meant for humans to comply, and that's what it's there for, right? For there to be order. I mean, it's just instinctual within us. Um, the shame barrier is the emotional wall that prevents victims from reporting a breach. We break this by treating mistakes as data, not causes for termination, and that data should say, okay, we need to upgrade, modify the conversation, not necessarily put the cart before the horse, engage in this monologue that makes it about them, begin to address risk in a different way.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me of a simple thing that we've talked about in education for years, right? That why did you go through this course, this class? It's not to pass the test, it's to learn something, change your behavior, do something different. It's the same kind of thing, right? I mean, why am I doing the compliance training? Well, as a business, I have to have you go through the compliance training, but that's not the point. The point is to actually change your behavior so we protect the business. That's different, and I think we miss that sometimes.
We've missed it for a long time.
Yeah.
And that's why it keeps getting worse. It's not getting any better. So what I said, what
Mhm.
175-ish billion records. We're still averaging about 3,000 data breaches per year. And we're still blaming the victim. I'm the guy that they call when there's a large data breach. And what that means
Right.
is like I'm the guy that the media calls when there's a large data breach. I've done like 500 plus TV shows, you name it, Fox, MSNBC, CNN. I've been on Howard Stern twice. Like I talk about this stuff all day,
Mm.
every day. They
Good.
call me to break down these issues, it's so that their audiences can understand these complex terms in a simple, non-technical way, non-technical jargon. And 100% of the time, when I'm called on to discuss these issues, the dialogue from the reporter, the journalist, whoever is, you know, bad company. What did they do wrong? They did something wrong. They
Yeah.
let our information out into the atmosphere, and now hackers have it. Bad company. And what does that mean? They're blaming the victim.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, let's back up a little bit. You know, First of all, there are men and women inside of these organizations called, CSOs, CISOs. These are, people who their job is to make sure that this doesn't happen. But guess what?
Mhm.
We're all victims of crime at some given point in our lives. Like that happens. That's natural and normal. People are assaulted, homes are broken into, identities are stolen. You don't blame somebody for being assaulted. But historically, we kind of have. What was she wearing when she was attacked? Like that's
Yeah.
ridiculous, but that's how we function. And what truly is not a part of our culture right now, which is a little frustrating to me, is that the security profession itself, I don't know if it's actually looked at as a true actual profession. For example, like I recently applied for a loan and when it asked me like, your employment, there was zero information that I could check off in regards to my profession being in the
Right.
security profession. Like nothing. There was nothing, not like teacher, like firefighter, police officer, nothing
Yeah.
about being in this, nothing about being, cybersecurity, nothing. Like it's not even listed in a loan application as a profession. And so in our culture, in our society, it's because, and I look at that as we don't truly look at security as something that we want or need. So we don't even acknowledge it in a loan application. And part of that
Right.
problem is like right now, which is a true thing. And it's important that we look at our
Mhm.
heroes as teachers, as nurses, as first responders, as firefighters, as police officers. And you know what? They are heroes. But here's the deal. When my presentations are over with and I get off the platform and I got a line of people I'm standing in front of, 100% of the time people say to me, or they ask the question, so who's winning? Are the good guys winning or are the bad guys winning?
Yeah.
And my response is, oh my God, like the good guys are winning. Of course the good guys are winning. And the good guys are winning, and we know the good guys are winning because you get to enjoy electricity. You get to enjoy, going to the grocery store and buying food. You get to enjoy our
Mhm.
critical infrastructures that function. You get to enjoy the banking system. And because the heroes are the CISOs, the CTOs, the CIOs. They're the unsung heroes in the background that nobody's talking about,
Mhm.
that truly are the reason why you and I enjoy the quality of life that we have today, because they're doing the
Mhm.
work that is necessary because of good versus evil, the 24/7, 365 battle that goes on behind the scenes, that most people think, hackers are Harry Potter waving a wand, and that like that
Mhm.
flicking a switch and the lights go on is magical. No, it's a very fragile infrastructure that's being run by heroes, unsung heroes. And I'm not being facetious when I say this. Like this is true, but it's still so fragile because we as humans still to this very day don't truly believe in security.
Right. Mm. Well, so let's bring this back to the business leader that's listening to this program, right? So what can they do? What are the first steps they should take to start building this culture of security appreciation in their business?
Be the guide, right? Who discusses the map, right? Start with that, right? Or at least engage in processes where you're
Mhm.
not putting the cart before the horse, right? So I'm asked this question all the time. This is where the kitchen table effect comes into play. Most
Mhm.
organizations have some form of a hands-on event, right? I actually think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity here. AI, deepfakes, voice cloning, this stuff, it's taken like cyber security training, security awareness, and it's made it very exciting, or at least to me.
Right.
And I think it should be to everybody else. I think there's a tremendous, tremendous amount of opportunity here. This is 007, Minority Report. This is better than Tom Cruise Mission Impossible stuff. It's awesome, right?
Yeah.
I think this is the perfect opportunity to engage your people in security awareness because this is fun, this is
Mhm.
interesting, this is more than security. This is Hollywood blockbuster stuff. This is sci-fi that grabs people's attention. Look, everybody has somebody in their life that is clueless with all of this stuff. We
Yeah.
all do. We have our mom, our sister, sometimes our kids, your spouse, right? Whoever that might be, right?
Mhm.
They're watching, late night TV. Think of our parents, for example. They're being bombarded with phone calls and emails and text messages. They're watching TV and dropping credit cards on, vitamins that they do not need, right? Subscriptions that they're being billed for monthly, right? They're
Yeah.
getting involved in pig butchering scams, right? They're being scammed left and right. And making security personal means, how your mom and your dad or your widowed sister is being slammed by romance scams and how they're all vulnerable. Having that dialogue will help those decision makers, those that are responsible for your budgets, right? Make it truly personalized to them. Those that are responsible for releasing the funds to do this type of training in addition to what you're
Mhm.
doing now, to engage in that all hands event that is a little bit different this year because it's, actually having a conversation versus this is, the current, state of the company and its stocks and so forth. In addition
Mm,
to, right? Uh, Showing how truly vulnerable everybody is. I mean, look at in every presentation that I do, inevitably people raise their hand and they ask, how do I know what links are okay to click when I do a Google search? And that's a very common question. And I don't
mm,
fault people for asking that question. What I fault is that we're just not engaged in the process of security appreciation to the degree that we could or should to actually
mm,
get people to move beyond questions like, how do I protect my credit cards? How do I know what link to click? How do I determine a secure password? Like those questions should have been asked 20 years ago and they should have been answered 20 years ago.
mm,
But we're not doing that. And until we do, I'm a little worried that going forward, we're not going to ever be able to meet the grandmother test again effectively. And companies are going to have to start locking things down in such a way where it's going to minimize productivity. The
mm,
workarounds are going to be impossible. And you're going to have to start like making it very difficult for anybody to do anything. And that means like making
mm.
things so secure that they're unable to work effectively.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's I mean, sadly, that makes sense. Well, so this has been a really, really interesting conversation, and this is, we're at the end of the time that we allotted. So I to respect the audience, I guess we should probably move on. But before I go, let me ask you a question, Robert. So at the end of the show, I always like to get some kind of a recommendation for the audience. A thought leader, an author, podcast, whatever that you think would be valuable for them to check out, to follow, so that they could learn more about.
You know, uh, it's nobody in the security space. Sorry about that. Um, like right now, I am upset by what's going on in the world. The world is just effectively on fire. We're
Yeah.
at each other's throats, and I don't like that.
Mm,
I'm trying to raise, you know, a family in an environment that is not conducive to, you know, a cohesive, wholesome, balanced, happy life. And I truly believe that that is because leadership is just failing left and right. And I'm not a very political person at all. And this conversation isn't about that at all. It's about, right now, I think that like we just need good leadership. And there's one person that's got my attention in all of leadership right now. And again, I'm
mm,
not political at all. It's this guy in North Carolina. Yeah, he's a senator. His name is Michael Garrett. He
mm,
makes the most sense to me.
interesting.
I didn't know much about him until I was introduced to him. And as far as political leaders are concerned, this is one guy that like I would like to have a conversation with because he actually makes good sense. And Michael Garrett, North Carolina senator,
Mm.
look him up, read his stuff. I think it'll give you hope.
No, no, great. Much appreciated, and I completely agree. We do need, some serious leadership, and it is something that has been lacking for a while. So, Robert, thanks so much for joining. Really interesting conversation, and I know lots of value to the audience today.
Hey, it's been my pleasure. And look, I say all the time, like a couple things, like to my learners, don't worry about any of this stuff. Right? Just do something about it. Just take
Mm,
action. Like the worst thing you could do is nothing. And and I also like have come to a point now where, like in my own mind, when I say don't worry about it, I'm actually a little worried myself now, and I think
mm,
it's because of AI and deep fakes and voice cloning, and I'm meeting the victims of these various frauds. Like, I'm meeting the moms and the dads, I'm meeting the loved ones that, because I'm hired to go in to do the program for the wealth manager whose clients just lost $600,000 in a pig butchering scam. Like, I'm the guy that they bring in, and I'm
mm,
seeing firsthand, like, the people that are actually losing everything. And these sociopaths, they don't care about your mother living out in the street. Like, they could care less that your
mm,
father is homeless. And too many people are just too vulnerable. And we collectively, those who get it, need to step in and do something about it. And I think that we can. We just need to recognize what security is and isn't, and engage in practices that modify the current conversation so that
Mm,
those who are the most vulnerable actually stand a chance.
mm. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Well, thanks, Robert. Much appreciated. And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arianresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arianresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arian Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.